Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, red line warning. Netanyahu has dropped annexation talks on Judea and Samaria after the UAE cautioned the step could jeopardize the Abraham Accords. Meanwhile, the IDF is expanding operations in Gaza City. And an exclusive interview with the U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee. Plus, never again, a biblical look at what could be the driving recent uptick of antisemitism in Europe. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. The UAE warned Israel and President Trump that annexing parts of biblical Judea and Samaria, also known as the West Bank, would threaten the Abraham Accords, signed nearly 5 years ago between Israel and Arab states. Meanwhile, Houthis continue firing missiles toward Israel, and Israelis protest to free the hostages. Here's the latest on all these and other stories.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reportedly removed discussions of annexing much of the biblical lands of Judea and Samaria off the agenda today, according to the Jerusalem Post. That move comes after a warning from the United Arab Emirates that annexing the biblical heartland, known as the West Bank, could endanger the Abraham Accords, saying the action would be a red line. The move to annex the area came in response to Western nations' decision to recognize a Palestinian state at the UN this month. Regional and local council heads from Judea and Samaria, along with Finance Minister Smotrich, laid out a plan for sovereignty over more than 80% of Judea and Samaria, leaving a number of Palestinian city-states in the West Bank.
Beyond the historical, biblical, and moral right of the Jewish people to their land, sovereignty has a paramount security role to prevent the establishment of an Arab state in the heart of our homeland.
U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee told CBN News that he and President Trump have not discussed the issue.
Generally, the president's attitude has been, not just with Israel, but with countries around the world, you're a sovereign nation. You make your own decisions.
Meanwhile, Houthi rebels continue to launch missiles at Israel, including one with a deadly cluster warhead. They were all intercepted before reaching Israeli territory. In Gaza, Israel Defense Forces Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir says Israel is expanding combat and intensifying its operations against Hamas in order to achieve the objectives of returning the hostages and defeating Hamas. In a post on Truth Social, President Trump warned Hamas on Wednesday to set the hostages free. Tell Hamas to immediately give back all 20 hostages, not 2 or 5 or 7, and things will change rapidly. It will end. In Jerusalem and elsewhere in Israel, protests to free the hostages turned violent. Demonstrators set fire to a car near the prime minister's residence. Netanyahu says the war could end immediately if Hamas agrees to the conditions set by the Security Cabinet, including the release of all 48 hostages, Hamas disarmed, and Israel has security control in the Gaza Strip. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
The IDF says it now controls up to 40% of Gaza City, even before its main offensive. The battle is key to destroying the last remaining Hamas stronghold in the Gaza Strip. All this as a pivotal United Nations meeting is about to take place. CBN's Paul Petit sat down with Mike Huckabee, United States Ambassador to Israel.
Ambassador Huckabee, appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you, Paul. Great to have you in Israel.
So as we speak, IDF soldiers are continuing their momentum moving into Gaza. We haven't heard any response regarding the Hamas offer to free the hostages. Is that the right move right now? And if so, why?
It's what the president has been pushing for and saying. It's what Israel has been pushing for. Israel has tried it soft. Now they're trying it hard. It's a tough call. But I don't know that they have much of a choice, because Hamas will walk up to the table and pretend they're going to make some type of deal that would let the hostages go, and then they always walk away. And then they add new conditions. I think people have to understand the reason this has gone on like it has, as long as it has, with as much suffering as it has, it's not because of Israel, it's because of Hamas.
Do you think perhaps Hamas is buying time, knowing that later this month the UN General Assembly will meet? Some countries, UK as well as Belgium and Canada, will, if they follow through on it, declare a sovereign state?
It could be. I think without a doubt, when these European countries started saying they were going to unilaterally declare Palestinian state, Hamas walked away from all the negotiations that had been going on. And of course they would. In their minds, this is what they've been wanting. They wanted a Palestinian state. Now they might get one for free.
How does that muddy the waters then, if in fact they're declared a sovereign state? Now there's a quote-unquote invasion of a sovereign state. What does that look like? How do you work through that?
It was the most insane thing when the European countries did this. First of all, it's a violation of the Oslo Accords. So that's a problem. They can't declare a Palestinian state. They just can't do that. And they also, they haven't defined where the boundaries are, who would lead it, how it would all work out. So it is an exercise in futility, I think largely designed to give Emmanuel Macron some sense of relevancy, because his approval ratings in France are somewhere just south of an STD or the whooping cough.
The president said that Israel has, quote, is not winning the war of public opinion. There's a PR problem going on now in the United States, well, across the globe. How does that get countered? How do you fix that?
It's a challenge for Israel because the monolithic media is so against them. It's partly because the leftist slant of the media, but a lot of it is because Hamas, to their credit, and I don't want to give them any credit that they don't deserve, but in this case, they've controlled the message machine pretty well. Now, they've got a lot of people complicit with them. United Nations, who puts out whatever they say through the, quote, Gaza Health Ministry, that's Hamas.
If you were the PR consultant for them, what would you tell them?
I'd tell them to get a bunch of social media influencers, because the real problem is with Generation Z. That's where they're losing ground, and that then affects as it bubbles up to generations above. I don't think the messaging of it all has probably been their highest priority, but it's going to have to be, because they need to get the truth out and counteract some of the most vicious lies that have ever been told against the government.
You know, most people view this as a battle between Hamas and Israel. There's something much deeper going on. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think that if you really look at this stepping back, you don't see just a geopolitical conflict. What you see is a spiritual conflict. This is a battle of the ages. This is not horizontal. It's not left, right, liberal, conservative. This is a vertical battle. It's heaven versus hell. It's good versus evil. People need to see it in that context or they'll miss the whole thing. Where does that come from? It doesn't come just from socio-political or economic pressures. It comes from an evil that originates from the most demonic forces that have ever been unleashed on this earth. And that's why I feel like particularly Christian believers in the United States and across the world need to recognize it. You got to pick a side. This is not something where it's, well, this side, but this side. Pick a side, because you can't straddle this fence. You just can't.
Welcome back to Jerusalem Dateline. I'm joined here in our studio with Paul Petit. Paul, we heard you talk with the ambassador about the UN. What are we going to hear in this next clip?
Yeah, it's a fascinating discussion with Huckabee. You know, he talked about how the media has been complicit and played right into Hamas's hands, and why this has led to talks of a two-state solution, as well as sort of kick the can down the road when it comes to releasing the hostages. And also we talk about the deteriorating Israel support in Congress, why that's happening.
Yeah, for many that's quite an alarming development. Let's take a look at that next clip.
Hamas, to their credit, and I don't want to give them any credit that they don't deserve, but in this case, they've controlled the message machine pretty well. So they'll put out a news release, they'll issue numbers and stories. The NGOs will pick it up, give it to the UN. The UN then publishes it without verifying any of it. They'll say this is the latest news. So you have a combination of recklessly irresponsible media, adding to an anti-Semitic fever that is going on across the world, and far leftist lunatics out parading in the streets of the United States and across the world saying from the river to the sea, making ridiculous claims both about Israel, committing genocide, which is absurd. And people believe it because they don't know any better. I tell people all the time, come to Israel, see things for yourself.
Yet, as we speak, the Israel lobby is, I wouldn't say deteriorating, but losing members.
And politics tend to look at a poll, and if the poll shows a trend going somewhere, rather than leading, they tend to be followers. And that's a real problem in politics globally. And I hate to say this about our American political system, but we have a lot of people that will govern by polling.
But we're even talking Jewish members here.
Yeah, and that's really troubling. You see people like Chuck Schumer, who is more afraid of his own shadow, and AOC, which is a shadow I wouldn't want to have, than he is his own convictions. You know, Chuck Schumer is saying things that are 180 degrees from what he said in his entire career. Jerry Nadler, who's Jewish, just announced he's not running again. Probably a good idea. But it's hard to understand why so many people who have been strong supporters of the U.S.-Israel relationship now are afraid of really some of the crazy people out screaming in the streets, and they're just folding like a cheap tent in a thunderstorm.
Those prayer warriors out there, what word do you have of encouragement for them to stay the course? And, you know, how could they go deeper in their prayer time to really see change here?
You know, the scripture tells us to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And I would say that there's a reason that that's in the scripture, because we should pray for the peace of Jerusalem. If there's peace in Jerusalem, there'll be peace around the world. And people should not quit praying, and they should not think that it is in vain, because it never is. Hamas has no future in Gaza. They're going to have to leave. They can disarm, they can go into exile. And Israel has offered them an opportunity to go into exile. But what they can't do is stay in Gaza and have anything to do with the future of Gaza. To let them stay there would be as ridiculous as someone thinking that the Nazis could stay and have a role in governing Germany after World War II.
Let's talk about what's going on here when it specifically to the West Bank. So you met with the Israeli finance minister, and you have concerns about that. Explain that, and what did you say to him?
There's a stalemate that exists between the Palestinian Authority and the government of Israel on some financial issues, one of which is the remittance of tax money that Israel is holding. It is supposed to go back to the Palestinian Authority, but the Palestinian Authority was also supposed to comply with certain guidelines. For example, to stop payments to terrorists. They've been doing it forever, and they pay terrorists large sums of money for killing Jews. They've claimed that they're stopping that, but they haven't. They just route it through a welfare system, and it's still going on. That's a huge problem. So Israel has said, you're not doing what you promised you would do starting in 2017, so if you're not going to keep your end of the bargain, then we're going to hold the money. I'd like to see that relaxed, not because I want to see the Palestinian Authority rewarded. I'd like for them to do what they claim that they're going to do, and that's stop those payments to the terrorists. Stop the curriculum in the schools that teach kids as young as 6 and 7 years old that it's a wonderful thing to grow up and to kill Jewish people. You know, teaching anti-Semitism as a curriculum in the classroom, that's a very, very dangerous thing to put into a culture. But that's been going on for years. Those are things that are supposed to stop, but they haven't. If they would, I think Israel would relax some of the financial constraints. The concern that I have in what's been reported has been that, look, I think that there's a lot of horrible things that can happen if the PA completely collapses. It's not that I'm trying to be a champion for them, but if they financially collapse, people can't get paid. There's no economic activity. And by the way, already there's 35% unemployment. It's a terrible economy. If that all goes even further sideways, then you're at a place where desperate people do desperate things. What we don't want to see is a violent uprising within the PA where people are just angry because they can't feed their families. The fact is the PA could probably take immediate steps to bring some resolution. Instead, they've taken the opposite approach. They've continued what's called pay for slay. They've continued the curriculum. And now they're pushing for unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state. That further froze any of the negotiations that I was involved in, shuttling back and forth between Ramallah and Jerusalem, trying to get some resolution just to bring a level of economic activity, not to help the PA government, but to help the merchants, help the workers. It's not their fault that their government is doing some of these things, but it would be to everyone's disadvantage if everything falls apart.
Paul, it was a great interview with the ambassador. Tell us your impressions of him.
You know, what a gentleman. And, I kept thinking as I'm talking about it, and I'm a little bit biased because I'm from Arkansas, former governor of Arkansas. His daughter is now the governor of Arkansas. But they're real people, right? They're boots on the ground, real people. And you get that when you talk to him, that he's not cutting corners. He's telling it to you straight.
Yeah. And how about the impressions you have? You've been here for about a month now.
Yes, been
your first time.
Yeah.
What's your impressions?
I think like everybody else, I have that same story going home, which is what? When you see it, you've been reading about it all your life. Now you're seeing where it happened. You're in Caesarea, I should say. And this spot is most likely where Paul stood when he appealed to Caesar. You're walking around the Sea of Galilee, and you're saying that, Peter's boat could have been right there when he was told to cast out onto the other side of the boat. When you see that, and now you have a visual to go with it, and I'm a visual guy, we're in a visual business, it really takes on a whole new understanding, a whole new appeal, and I think a real intimacy to the gospel. Yeah.
So that's the biblical part of Israel. And then we were down at Kibbutz Be'eri last week. We saw firsthand what happened on October 7th. What's your impressions about what people are seeing back in the U.S., what they're hearing, and what you saw firsthand?
Well, when you're standing in front of a building that has been obliterated because it was burnt, there's bullet holes all over the side, one after another of these kibbutzes. It's so impactful to realize, what had happened, and then to hear the stories. I think a lot of people in the U.S., they just know that, yes, 1,200 were killed, and, it sort of came and went now that we're nearly 2 years out of it. But the fact is, this went on for days, and learning that, some of the people there were complicit, that lived with these people, maybe grew up with some of their kids, in helping Hamas during the attacks is horrifying. And we're getting this much visually, obviously, of this much of what really happened on October 7th because you simply can't show it on television. So to bring the horror into it and standing in front of one of those burning buildings that was literally burnt out during October 7th attacks, really brings it home to see what had happened. A lot of people, they haven't come home yet. They haven't returned to what were beautiful, thriving communities.
Yeah, well, Paul, it's been great to see you and your wife here as well. You both had quite an impressive time here
it's been wonderful.
In Israel. We look forward to you coming back.
Well, thanks so much. Appreciate that, Chris. It's been great seeing you again.
Yeah.
It's been too long.
It has been. From France to Germany, from the Netherlands to Italy, Jewish people are being harassed yet again in Europe. CBN's Raj Nir talks with Simon Barrett of Revelation TV about what's behind it and how to fight it.
Simon, what is going on in Europe?
Yeah, so what we're seeing across the continent of Europe now is frightening. We are seeing so many outbreaks of Jew hatred, where Jewish people are being targeted, where Israelis are being targeted, whether that's in Britain, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium. Europe is becoming a dangerous place for Israelis and for Jewish people. I'll just give you a couple of rundowns of what we've seen recently. 2 Israeli holidaymakers who were vacating what is known as center parks, which is a leisure camp and holiday camp for families and for young people. They were secretly filmed and it was uploaded to social media. And local residents then decided to attack them so violently that they were taken to hospital. That's in the Netherlands. And then if we see what's happened in France, in the region of the French Alps, British Orthodox Jewish holidaymakers went to the Alps, only to find that their 5 cars were sprayed in orange paint that said "Free Palestine." We've had other instances, for example, in France as well, and this is in the area of the French Provence area near the Spanish border, where 150 Israeli children and teenagers were denied access to a leisure center where they'd be doing on slip adventure courses, they'd go on rides and just having a good time, were denied entry. Now that guy's been arrested. And the UK as well, we've seen that a music artist known as Bob Vylan, who was starred in Glastonbury, which is Britain and Europe's biggest music festival, chanted death to the IDF. And the Community Security Trust has reported that anti-Semitism has increased since he's done that.
So what should Christians in the West, how should we be processing this? What should we be doing?
Well, firstly, I think we have to kind of process this and to look at the responsibility of this inflaming Jew hatred that we're seeing across Britain and across the continent of Europe starts with our media. So our mainstream media reporting the situation in Gaza, saying there's a humanitarian crisis, that Israel is deliberately starving the Gazans and preventing international aid and assistance to their help, which we know is controlled by Hamas. So this is playing into the minds of Islamists and others across Europe who see that Israel is at fault. So therefore, the Israelis need to be attacked and Jewish people need to be attacked as well. So when we look at scriptures, we have to look at Jeremiah 16, verses 15 and 16, which talks about the Jewish people coming back to the land of Israel in fulfillment of prophecy and how God is going to send out the fishermen, firstly, to bring them back so that they can come back in fulfillment of biblical prophecy. Then he says, I will send out the hunters to hunt them and to bring them back home. And I think we are now living in the time and the season of the hunters. And so this should make us very concerned that what starts with the Jewish people never finishes with the Jewish people. And if the police and our government and our authorities don't clamp down on these appalling attacks against the Jewish community, then that same fear and terror is going to come and terrorize European civilization.
What's horrific about the history of anti-Semitism from my vantage point is anti-Semitism is a slithery evil that always finds its way to make itself palatable to the current generation. And so I do think it is a canary in the coal mine moment, which is the hatred of the Jewish people to me is a hatred of the God of Israel. The hatred of the Jewish people to me is a hatred of what the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob brought into this world, right? That we're not pagans, that we're not heathens, that we're not survival of the fittest, but all people are created in the image of God and worthy of life. I think the Jewish people are a mirror to the world, where if you reject and ostracize and attack the Jewish people, then there's something festering that's not good. I'll give you the last word, brother. Where do we go from here?
I think we need to pray and we need to show love and support to the Jewish community, to Israel. At this time, they are scared, they feel isolated, they feel demonized. And this is the time that as Christians, we can make a difference, that we can be that generation who failed during the Second World War to speak up and befriend the Jewish people when they needed them.
Simon, my brother, I appreciate your time.
CBN Israel is doing just that, making a difference in the lives of Jews from around the world who are immigrating to Israel.
War forced Natalia, Yuri, and their 2 daughters to flee from Ukraine, and their Jewish heritage opened the door to Israel. But after arriving, Natalia faced a personal crisis, cancer. She felt overwhelmed and in desperation sought help. CBN Israel responded, providing emotional support, and they also stepped in with food, furniture, and even computers for the girls' schooling.
There are good people in the world. I feel like I'm not alone and that you're alongside me.
CBN partners are helping Natalia's family through CBN Israel to succeed in their new life in their homeland.
Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, and you can also access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And please keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem, for protection for Israel, and that all the hostages would be brought home safely and soon. I'm Chris Mitchell. For all of us here at the Jerusalem Bureau, we'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.